You didn't break down. That's why nobody noticed. You kept waking up. You kept answering messages. You kept showing up where your life expected you to be. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. You were still functioning, still reliable, still there. But something subtle had already started happening. Not around you, inside you. You began to feel slightly behind your own life. Not lost, not overwhelmed, just not fully inside it. You would finish conversations and realize you weren't really there. You would complete entire days that left no emotional trace. Nothing hurt, nothing healed, nothing stayed. At first you told yourself it was exhaustion. You needed rest. You needed time. You needed space. But rest didn't bring you back. Time didn't bring you back. Space didn't bring you back. Because you didn't leave physically. You left psychologically. And psychological absence is invisible. You can laugh and still not feel present. You can succeed and still feel disconnected. You can live an entire life without ever feeling like you're inside it. That's what makes it dangerous. There was no collapse, no breaking point, no moment where everything stopped. Your life continued. Your responsibilities continued. Your identity continued. And you continued with it. But continuation is not the same as presence. You weren't choosing your life anymore. You were maintaining it, like something already set in motion, something that didn't need you to feel it, only to keep it running. And the scariest part wasn't that you were struggling. It was that you weren't struggling at all. Because struggle would have forced you to notice. This didn't. This let you disappear quietly, while everything else kept moving, as if you were still there. It didn't feel like you were losing yourself. It felt like you were becoming stronger, less emotional, less reactive, less affected by things that used to reach you. You could handle more. You could tolerate more. You could move through disappointment without stopping. And people admired that. They called you mature. They called you stable. They said you were resilient. But resilience can hide something. Because what looked like strength from the outside was distance on the inside. You weren't feeling less because you healed. You were feeling less because you adapted. Your nervous system made a decision quietly. If feeling deeply could hurt you, it would help you feel less. Not nothing, just less. Less excitement, less fear, less attachment, less you. And that's how it protected you. It didn't break your life. It removed you from the experience of it. Not all at once, gradually. So gradually, you didn't notice when it happened. You were still there physically, still speaking, still responding, still continuing. But internally, something had stepped back. Something had stopped participating. You didn't break down. You faded away. Not because you were weak, because your mind found a way to survive. It built distance between you and your pain. But distance doesn't choose what it protects you from. It protects you from everything. The lows disappear, but so do the highs. Connection weakens, meaning fades, presence dissolves. Until one day you realize something that changes how you see everything. Your life didn't stop. It kept going without you inside it. At first it just felt like you were tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. A different kind. The kind that follows you into moments that used to give you energy. You wake up and nothing feels wrong, but nothing feels right either. Everything is neutral, flat, manageable. You move through your day without resistance, without excitement, without urgency. You tell yourself this is what stability feels like. This is what adulthood feels like. This is what happens when you grow up. You stop feeling everything so intensely. You become calmer, more controlled, more unaffected. And unaffected feels like progress. Because you remember a time when everything touched you, when rejection stayed with you for days, when uncertainty kept you awake at night, when hope could lift you and destroy you at the same time. You don't miss the pain. You don't miss the chaos. So you accept the numbness. You accept the quiet. You accept the distance, because distance feels safer than intensity, safer than vulnerability, safer than being exposed to things you cannot control. And control becomes your new definition of peace. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop expecting too much. You stop investing emotionally in outcomes. You become efficient, functional, stable, and stability earns respect. People trust you more. They rely on you. They see someone who has themselves together, someone who doesn't fall apart, someone who doesn't break. But what they don't see is what it took for you to become that person. You didn't just become stable. You became unavailable. Unavailable to your own experience. Unavailable to your own reactions. Unavailable to your own life while it was happening. You still participated. You still showed up. You still performed. But performance is not the same as presence. Performance can happen without you. Presence cannot. Presence requires you to be inside what you're living, not observing it, not managing it, living it. And somewhere along the way, you stopped living it. You started managing it, managing your emotions, managing your expectations, managing your reactions, managing your distance from anything that could destabilize you. Because destabilization was the threat. Destabilization was the thing you learned to avoid. Not consciously, automatically. Your nervous system learned that intensity was dangerous. That uncertainty was unsafe. That emotional exposure carried risk. So it adapted. It lowered the volume. It reduced the signal. It created space between you and the experience. Not to harm you, to protect you. And protection works. Protection keeps you functional. Protection keeps you moving. Protection keeps you from collapsing. But protection also removes something else. Participation. You are still there physically, but psychologically you are somewhere behind yourself. Watching, monitoring, maintaining. You begin to notice how often you feel like an observer. You hear yourself speaking, but the words don't feel owned. You see yourself acting, but the actions don't feel chosen. You exist, but you don't feel present inside your existence. And because nothing is broken, no one intervenes. No one asks questions. No one sees the absence. Because absence doesn't look like pain. Absence looks like functioning. You keep succeeding. You keep progressing. You keep continuing. And continuation hides everything. Continuation convinces everyone, including you, that nothing is wrong. But something is missing. Not externally. Internally. You begin to realize you are no longer reacting to your life. You are predicting it. You know how your days will feel. You know how your conversations will go. You know how you will respond before it happens. Because you are no longer inside the moment. You are ahead of it, detached from it, protected from it, and protection becomes your environment. You live inside emotional insulation. Nothing reaches you fully. Not pain, not joy, not meaning. Everything touches the surface and stops. And at first that feels like peace, until you notice what peace has replaced. Aliveness. You try to remember the last time something moved you deeply. The last time something stayed with you. The last time something made you forget yourself because you were fully inside it. The answer doesn't come easily, not because it never happened, because it stopped happening gradually. So gradually you adapted to the absence. Adaptation is invisible while it's happening. It only becomes visible in hindsight. You realize you didn't lose yourself in a moment of crisis. You lost yourself in moments of protection, moments where your system decided it was safer not to feel. Moments where distance replaced presence. Moments where survival replaced participation. And survival is convincing. Survival feels responsible. Survival feels mature. Survival feels necessary. But survival was never meant to be permanent. Survival was meant to get you through something, not become who you are. Yet slowly, survival became your identity. You became the person who doesn't break, the person who doesn't collapse, the person who doesn't need too much. And needing less feels like strength. Until you realize needing less also means receiving less, experiencing less, living less. You stopped feeling pain deeply, but you also stopped feeling life deeply. And that's when the realization begins to form. Not loudly, quietly. You didn't become stronger. You became distant. You didn't become calmer. You became absent. You didn't break down. You faded away, not visibly, internally. And the most unsettling part is how long it took you to notice. Because your life never stopped. Your responsibilities never stopped. Your identity never stopped. Everything continued. Everything moved forward. Everything worked. Except you weren't inside it anymore. You were behind it, following it, maintaining it, watching it. And the question that begins to surface is not dramatic. It's simple. When did you stop being there? Because you can exist inside a life for years and still not be present in it. You can function perfectly and still be missing from yourself. You can survive everything and still lose the experience of being alive. Not because you broke, because you adapted by disappearing. And disappearance doesn't make noise. Disappearance happens quietly until one day you recognize it, not in your life, in yourself. You realize your life is still here, but you are not fully inside it. Not yet, not anymore, and not unless something changes. Not outside, inside, where fading began. The moment you realize it, nothing around you changes. Your life still looks the same. You still wake up in the same place. You still move through the same routines. You still answer when people call your name. But something inside you is no longer hidden. You see the distance, not as an idea, as a fact. You begin to notice how often you are not fully inside your own moments. You are there physically. You are listening. You are responding. But part of you remains somewhere else. slightly behind, slightly removed, as if you are watching yourself live instead of living. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You notice how long this has been happening, how many conversations you weren't truly inside, how many days passed without leaving an emotional trace, how many versions of yourself existed only to function, not to feel. And the realization is not dramatic. It is quiet, clear, almost calm. You didn't break down. You faded away, not in response to one moment, in response to many. Moments where you learned it was safer not to react. Moments where you learned it was safer not to care too much. Moments where you learned it was safer to remain in control. Control became your protection. Control became your identity. Because control kept you from being overwhelmed. Control kept you from being exposed. Control kept you from feeling things you didn't know how to survive. So your nervous system made an adjustment, not to destroy you, to preserve you. It reduced your emotional exposure. It created distance between you and the experience. Not completely, just enough. Enough to keep you functional. Enough to keep you stable. Enough to keep you moving. But distance has a cost. Distance protects you from pain. It also protects you from participation. You stop feeling the intensity of loss, but you also stop feeling the intensity of connection. You stop feeling the weight of disappointment, but you also stop feeling the depth of meaning. You stop feeling the chaos, but you also stop feeling alive. And at first you don't question it, because it works. It allows you to continue. It allows you to build a life. It allows you to become someone reliable, someone strong, someone unaffected. And unaffected becomes your identity, not because it reflects who you are, because it protects who you are. Protection is persuasive. Protection tells you this is safety. Protection tells you this is maturity. Protection tells you this is strength. But protection never tells you what it takes from you. It never tells you that the same wall that keeps pain out keeps you out too. You are still present physically, but psychologically you're standing behind a barrier, watching your own life happen. You see yourself succeed. You see yourself continue. You see yourself exist, but you don't feel connected to it. And connection is what makes something feel real. Without connection, everything becomes distant, even your own life, even yourself. You begin to realize you've been living in survival mode, not because your life is dangerous, because your nervous system learned not to trust safety. It learned that stability could disappear. It learned that emotional investment could lead to pain. So it chose something else. It chose distance. Distance became your environment. Distance became your normal. Distance became who you believed you were, until now. Now you see the truth clearly. You are not this distant version of yourself. You are the person behind it. The person who stepped back. The person who adapted. The person who faded. Not because you were weak, because you were protecting yourself. And protection was necessary once. Protection kept you from breaking. Protection kept you from collapsing. Protection kept you alive. But protection was never meant to replace you. It was meant to help you survive, not to become your permanent state. And this is the midpoint most people never reach. The moment where they realize something irreversible. They didn't lose themselves suddenly. They left themselves gradually. Not in one decision, in thousands of small adaptations. Adaptations that created distance. Adaptations that created safety. Adaptations that created absence. And absence became invisible because everything still worked. Your life continued. Your identity continued. Your responsibilities continued. Everything moved forward, except your presence. Your presence stayed behind, watching, waiting, disconnected. And the most unsettling truth is this: your life did not need you to feel it. It only needed you to maintain it. So it kept going, without you inside it. Not because you disappeared physically, because you disappeared psychologically. And psychological disappearance is silent. No alarms, no warnings, no clear moment where it begins. Only a quiet realization when you finally see it. You didn't break down. You faded away. And now that you see it, you are faced with something most people spend their lives avoiding. The truth that you are not fully here. Not yet, not anymore, but not permanently gone either. Because the part of you that notices the distance is the part of you that never left. Still there, still aware, still waiting. Waiting for you to stop standing behind the barrier and step back inside your own life. There's a moment after you see it when something heavier appears. Not panic, not fear, grief. Not grief for something you lost suddenly. Grief for something you slowly stopped being. You begin to remember fragments, versions of yourself that felt closer to the surface. Versions of yourself that reacted without hesitation, that cared without calculating the risk, That felt present without trying. You realized those versions didn't disappear overnight. They faded, replaced by someone more stable, more controlled, more protected. And protection came with a condition. You had to step back, not completely, just enough to avoid being hurt again. At the time, it felt necessary. It felt intelligent. It felt like survival. But survival is not neutral. Survival changes you. It teaches you to stay guarded even when the danger is gone. It teaches you to remain distant even when connection is possible. It teaches you to exist in preparation instead of participation. And preparation never ends. You keep waiting for the moment when it will finally be safe to return. Safe to feel, safe to care, safe to be fully inside your life again. But that moment never announces itself, because the barrier was never outside you. It was built inside you, built quietly, built gradually, built from every moment you decided it was safer not to feel everything. And now, standing here aware of the distance, you begin to understand the cost. Not the cost of failure, the cost of absence. You were there for your life, but you were not inside it. You protected yourself from pain, but you also protected yourself from meaning. You avoided collapse, but you also avoided aliveness. And this is the truth most people never admit. It is possible to survive everything and still feel like you are missing from your own existence. You didn't break. You didn't lose control. You didn't fall apart. You left quietly, piece by piece, moment by moment, until the version of you that remained was the one who could function without needing to feel alive. And now, for the first time, you see it clearly, not as weakness, as adaptation, not as failure, as protection. But protection was never meant to replace you. It was meant to hold your place until you were ready to return. And the grief you feel now is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign that you remember. You remember what it felt like to be inside your life. And remembering is where return begins. At first, the return doesn't feel like strength. It feels like exposure. Because when you stop disappearing, you start feeling everything you kept at a distance. Not all at once, in fragments, small moments that don't seem important to anyone else, a silence that feels heavier than usual, a memory that lingers longer than expected, a question that doesn't disappear when you distract yourself. You realize how much of your life you experienced from behind a barrier, how many moments passed through you instead of staying with you. And now, without that same distance, everything feels closer. Not easier, closer. You notice your reactions more. You notice the hesitation before you speak. You notice the instinct to withdraw when something feels too real. Before, you didn't see these moments. You moved past them automatically. Now you are inside them. And being inside them feels unfamiliar because distance had become your normal. Distance had become your safety. Distance had become the place where nothing could reach you fully. Returning means leaving that safety, not all at once, moment by moment. You begin to stay in conversations instead of drifting away. You begin to listen without retreating into yourself. You begin to feel discomfort without immediately escaping it. And discomfort teaches you something. It teaches you that you are still here, that you never disappeared completely. You were present enough to survive, present enough to continue, present enough to function. But now you are becoming present enough to participate. Participation is different. Participation requires vulnerability. Participation requires uncertainty. Participation requires you to exist without the guarantee of control. And control had been your protection. Control kept you stable. Control kept you from falling apart. But control also kept you from fully living. You begin to see the pattern clearly. Every time something meaningful approached you, stepped back. Every time something uncertain appeared, you created distance. Every time something real demanded your presence, you protected yourself from it. Not because you didn't care, because you cared enough to fear losing it. And fear created distance. Distance created safety. Safety created absence. Now absence is no longer invisible. You feel it when you almost disconnect. You feel it when you almost disappear again. And this time something inside you hesitates. Not because disappearance is impossible, because it is no longer automatic. You see it happening. You see the moment where you can stay or leave. And seeing that moment is everything. Because choice exists only when awareness exists. Before, you disappeared without knowing. Now you are aware of the exit, and awareness gives you something you didn't have before. The ability to remain, not perfectly, not permanently, but intentionally. You remain in moments that feel uncertain. You remain in emotions that feel uncomfortable. You remain in experiences that feel unfamiliar. And remaining changes something fundamental. It reconnects you to yourself, not the version of you that adapted, not the version of you that protected, The version of you that was always there, waiting behind the distance, waiting behind the barrier, waiting behind the adaptation. You realized something important. You were never truly gone. You were paused. Paused by protection. Paused by survival. Paused by the belief that distance was necessary to stay intact. But you were always close enough to return. Return doesn't happen in one decision. Return happens in moments. Moments where you choose presence instead of protection. Moments where you choose participation instead of distance. Moments where you choose to stay inside your life instead of watching it from outside. And these moments feel small, insignificant, easy to overlook, but they are not small. They are the exact opposite of disappearance. They are the beginning of aliveness, not the dramatic version, the quiet version, the version where you feel connected to your own existence again, where your life stops feeling like something you are maintaining and starts feeling like something you are inside. And slowly, without forcing it, something shifts. You stop feeling like a stranger to your own moments. You stop feeling like an observer of your own life. You stop feeling like someone who survived by leaving. You begin to feel like someone who stayed, not because everything became safe, because you stopped abandoning yourself when it wasn't. And that is where the return truly begins. Not when the world changes, when you do. When you step back into the place you never fully left, the place where you were waiting to become real again. There is no dramatic moment when you fully return. No clear signal that tells you everything is different now. From the outside, your life still looks the same. The same routines, the same responsibilities, the same expectations waiting for you every morning. But something essential is no longer missing. You are there, not just physically, internally. You notice your moments while they are happening. You feel your presence inside your own life again. Not constantly, not perfectly, but enough to know the difference. Enough to know what it feels like to stay. And staying changes everything. Not because your life became easier, because you stopped leaving it. You stopped stepping back every time something felt uncertain. You stopped protecting yourself by disappearing. You stopped surviving at a distance. You began living at close range. And close range is where everything becomes real. The fear, the meaning, the connection, the uncertainty, all of it belongs to you now. Not because it was given to you, because you are finally inside it. You didn't break down. You didn't collapse. You didn't fail. You adapted. You protected yourself. You survived the only way you knew how. But survival was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to hold your place until you were ready to come back. And now you are no longer the person who faded away. You are the person who noticed, the person who returned, the person who stayed. And staying is what makes your life yours again.